My name is Alina Vance, and for the better part of 2 decades, my world was a neat and orderly place, defined by the clean lines of data and the predictable hum of servers. I'm a senior data analyst for a large logistics corporation in Denver, Colorado. From my desk on the 17th floor, I had a clear view of the Rocky Mountains, a constant, calming presence that reminded me that some things are solid and unchangeable. I loved my job. It was like solving a giant, intricate puzzle every single day. My team, Section 7, was a well-oiled machine, a small family of professionals who had worked together for years. We were the veterans, the ones they called when the numbers didn't add up and a multi-million-dollar shipping contract was on the line. Our boss, a man named David, was more of a mentor than a manager. He trusted us and we respected him. Life was good, stable, and satisfying. The heart of our team, its brightest spark, was a woman named Amelia. She was younger than the rest of us, but she had a mind that moved like lightning. Where we saw spreadsheets, she saw stories. She could spot a trend or an anomaly from a mile away, and her insights had saved the company a fortune more than once. By every single metric we had, she outperformed the rest of the section combined. She was brilliant, but she was also kind and humble, always willing to help someone who was struggling with a complex problem. I felt a sort of protective, big sisterly fondness for her. We all did. Then one Tuesday morning, our world was shaken. David announced his retirement. We threw him a party with a terrible sheet cake and good whiskey, and we wished him well, but a sense of dread hung in the air. Who could possibly replace him? A week later, we found out. His name was Brendan. He walked into our quiet, efficient world like a tornado in a library. He couldn't have been more than 28, with a cheap suit that was too tight in the shoulders and a haircut that looked like it cost more than his shoes. He had this smug, unearned confidence that set my teeth on edge from the moment he opened his mouth. He'd been handpicked by a senior executive, some favorite nephew or golfing buddy's son, and he had no real practical experience in our field. You could just tell. He gave an introductory speech filled with empty corporate buzzwords like synergy and disruptive innovation, proudly proclaiming that his goal was to become the youngest executive in the company's history. He looked at us, a team with decades of combined experience, as if we were dusty old relics that needed to be cleared out. From day one, it was his way or the highway. He started making sweeping, dramatic changes to processes he didn't understand, creating chaos where there had once been order. He saw our quiet competence not as a strength, but as a challenge to his authority. He was a small man desperate to cast a large shadow, and he was determined to crush anyone who made him feel inadequate. And right away, he set his sights on Amelia. He couldn't stand her. She was everything he wasn't, genuinely brilliant, respected, and confident in her own abilities without needing to shout about them. He'd make snide comments in meetings, saying she needed to be put in her place, or that she was too outspoken for a woman in her position. We all saw it for what it was, pure, uncut misogyny and professional jealousy. The simmering tension finally boiled over about a month into his reign of terror. We were working on a critical quarterly performance report for one of our biggest clients. It was a high-stakes project that would determine shipping routes and resource allocation for the next 3 months. Amelia was leading the data compilation. Late one evening, she came to my desk, her face pale. She pointed to a section in the final draft that Brendan had personally edited. He had completely falsified the data, changing key figures to make his own initial projections look better. He had turned a potential loss into a projected gain, ignoring the reality that this decision could cause massive supply chain disruptions down the line. It wasn't just unethical, it was corporate malpractice. The next morning, during our team meeting, Amelia handled it with her usual grace. She didn't accuse him. She gently pointed it out. "Brendan," she said, her voice calm and professional, "I think there might be a calculation error on the projection figures for the shipping logistics report. The raw data doesn't seem to support this conclusion. It could cause some major issues for the client if they act on it." The room went silent. We all knew it wasn't an error. Brendan's face went from pale to a blotchy, angry red. He stared at her, his eyes cold and hard. "I signed off on it, Amelia," he said, his voice dangerously low. "It's final. Maybe you should focus on your own work instead of questioning my decisions." He was publicly drawing a line in the sand. He was telling her and all of us that the truth didn't matter. Only his authority did. Amelia simply nodded, her expression unreadable, and sat down. But we all knew what had just happened. For Brendan, this was a declaration of war. It was open season on Amelia. Brendan's campaign to undermine and destroy Amelia started immediately, and it was brutal. It was like watching a predator stalk its prey in slow motion. He began by arbitrarily downgrading her performance on official reviews, citing vague reasons like not a team player or resistant to new management directives. These were blatant lies, and we all knew it. He started messing with her schedule, a special kind of cruelty. Amelia took care of her elderly mother and had to leave every day at 5:30 sharp to administer her medication. Brendan suddenly began scheduling mandatory emergency meetings at 5:15, then would publicly berate her for trying to leave on time. He'd pile her with impossible workloads, assigning her two conflicting high-priority projects at once, both with insane deadlines, clearly setting her up to fail. Of course, with the help of a few of us working behind the scenes, she never did fail. She would stay late after taking care of her mother, coming back to the office to finish the work, her face etched with exhaustion but her spirit still unbroken. This only seemed to make Brendan angrier. He started trying to isolate her, holding senior team huddles in his office and deliberately leaving her out, even though she was functionally our lead analyst. The public humiliation became a regular occurrence. He would scream at her in the middle of the office over the tiniest, most insignificant detail, his voice echoing off the cubicle walls. The rest of us would just stare at our screens, our knuckles white, a sickening mix of rage and fear churning in our stomachs. The atmosphere in Section 7, once so collaborative and cheerful, became toxic and heavy. It felt like living in a house with an abuser. We were all walking on eggshells, hypervigilant, waiting for the next explosion. Amelia bore the brunt of it, but we all felt the fallout. The section was in free fall. Morale disintegrated. People who used to love their jobs started calling in sick. The quality of our work, once the pride of the company, started to slip. Many of the team members who weren't in Brendan's line of fire took advantage of his lack of oversight, leaving at 3 in the afternoon or spending their days playing games online. Brendan didn't care, as long as his target was being punished. His obsession with breaking Amelia was all-consuming. That's when we started calling him Captain Ahab. He was so singularly focused on destroying his one white whale that he couldn't see he was sinking his own ship and drowning his own crew in the process. We started calling our section the Peckwad. It was a dark, gallows humor that helped us cope. Whenever we'd see him storming through the office on another warpath towards Amelia's desk, one of us would mutter a quote from Moby Dick under our breath. "From hell's heart I stab at thee," became our silent, bitter mantra. Amelia tried to escape. She applied for transfers to other departments, positions she was wildly overqualified for. But Brendan blocked every single attempt. He would call the hiring manager and poison the well, telling them she was a problem employee. It was a twisted kind of possessiveness. He screamed at her that he didn't want her on his section, but he refused to let her go. It was the classic abuser's creed: if I can't have you, nobody will. I tried to intervene in small ways. I spoke to Brendan privately, trying to reason with him. "Brendan," I said one afternoon, "Amelia is our top performer. We really need her expertise on the Miller account." He just sneered at me. "I'm the manager, Alina. I decide who works on what. Stay in your lane." I started staying late to help Amelia with the impossible workloads he piled on her, but that only made him more suspicious and hostile towards both of us. The breaking point, the moment where I knew our small acts of defiance were not enough, came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Amelia came to my desk, holding a piece of paper. Her hands were trembling. It was her official 6-month performance review, signed by Brendan. It was a work of pure fiction, filled with fabricated incidents and outright lies, rating her as needs improvement and placing her on a formal performance improvement plan. This was a direct step towards firing her. "He's going to fire me, Alina," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I can't find a way out. He has me trapped." Seeing her, this brilliant, strong woman, so utterly defeated and hopeless, was like a physical blow. A cold, hard rage settled in my chest. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "No, he's not. Wrong is wrong, and this ends now." That night I went home and I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that falsified document, the first real shot in this war. Brendan wasn't just a bad boss, he was corrupt, and he had left a trail. I called Amelia. I told her to gather everything. Every email, every schedule change, every note she had taken after a public screaming match. Thankfully, I knew my friend. She was meticulous. She had kept a detailed log of every single incident, with dates, times, and direct quotes. She had documented everything. This was our ammunition. The next day, she brought it all to me on a flash drive. I spent the entire weekend at my dining room table, surrounded by printouts, cross-referencing her notes with my own. I drafted a formal complaint. I laid out the entire sordid story, starting with the falsified client report and detailing the subsequent campaign of harassment and retaliation, providing a mountain of evidence to back up every claim. On Monday morning, with a heart pounding like a drum, I sent the entire package in a carefully worded email to Brendan's boss, a senior vice president named Mr. Harrison, and I copied the head of human resources and the company's equal employment opportunity officer. An hour later, my phone rang. It was Mr. Harrison's assistant summoning me to his office on the 40th floor. The meeting was terrifying. Mr. Harrison was a stoic, unreadable man. I walked him through the complaint, my voice shaking at first, then growing stronger as I laid out the undeniable facts. He listened without interruption, his face a mask of professional neutrality. When I was done, he simply said, "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Ms. Vance. We will look into it." I left his office feeling like I had just thrown a rock at a giant and wasn't sure if I had missed or just made it angry. Later that day, Amelia was called into a meeting with Mr. Harrison and the head of human resources. She presented her evidence, her meticulous logs, her irrefutable proof. The corporate machine, slow as it was, began to grind. 2 days later, a small victory. Amelia was granted an immediate transfer to a different division, a promotion, in fact. She was free. Brendan was furious. He had lost his whale. And then, as I knew he would, the great eye of Ahab turned on me. The very next day, the harassment that had been Amelia's daily nightmare became mine. My projects were reassigned. I was given meaningless, mind-numbing data entry tasks that a fresh-out-of-college intern would handle. I was excluded from meetings, ignored in the hallways. Brendan would walk past my desk and mutter insults just loud enough for me to hear. But I was ready. I did exactly what Amelia had done. I documented everything. Every snide comment, every demeaning task, every email I was left off of. After a week of this, I sent a short, simple follow-up email to Mr. Harrison. As anticipated, I wrote, "The retaliatory behavior has now been directed towards me following my complaint. Please find attached a log of all incidents from the past 5 days." The response this time was immediate. Within the hour, I was called by Human Resources and offered a transfer to another senior position in a department I had wanted to work in for years. I was out. I was safe. Brendan was now alone on the deck of his sinking ship. He had driven out every senior, experienced member of his crew. He reorganized the section, getting rid of anyone who might question him and filling it with brand new recruits, fresh faces who were too young, too inexperienced, or too afraid to challenge him. He wanted to be the smartest person in the room, and he had finally achieved it by firing everyone who was smarter than him. He retreated into his office, becoming a hermit. He kept the door locked and the blinds closed. We heard from contacts still inside that productivity in Section 7 had completely collapsed. The work they produced was riddled with errors. Deadlines were missed constantly. Brendan's rising star was plummeting back to earth, and he was getting desperate. That's when he made his final, fatal mistake. In a desperate attempt to resurrect his career and prove his managerial prowess, he stole a massive, highly complex project from our company's Seattle branch. It was a huge database migration for a new, important client. He bypassed all the normal protocols and assigned the entire project to his favorite newbie, a sycophantic kid named Kevin who barely knew how to run the necessary software. What followed was a disaster of epic proportions. Kevin, completely out of his depth, destroyed the project. He corrupted the client's entire database, a catastrophic error that would cost the company millions to fix. But through it all, Brendan, hiding in his office, signed off on every single faulty stage of the process, trying to cover up the unfolding disaster, hoping for a miracle that would never come. Everyone left in the section was either too new to understand the scale of the screw-up or too terrified of Brendan to say anything. But the thing about a company like ours is that nothing stays secret for long. Amelia, myself, and a few other veterans who had been forced out by Brendan had a group chat. We had all landed on our feet in better positions, but we stayed in touch, a support group of survivors. One of our old colleagues, a man named Mark who had quit in disgust a month earlier, got a panicked call from a friend still trapped in Section 7. The friend told him everything about the database disaster. Mark told us. The pieces were all there. The incompetence, the cover-up, the signature of a desperate man on all the falsified progress reports. And that's when I knew our revenge wouldn't be loud or confrontational. It would be quiet, professional, and absolutely devastating. I knew the corporate structure inside and out. I knew there was an internal inspector general's office, a feared and powerful department that investigated fraud, waste, and abuse. They answered to no one but the board of directors. Late that night, from my personal computer at home, I drafted a cool, precise, and anonymous email. I laid out the facts of the failed Seattle project. I provided the project codes, the server locations for the corrupted data, and the specific dates of Brendan's digital signatures approving the faulty work. I didn't mention the harassment or the history of his behavior. I didn't need to. I just gave them a map and told them where to find the body. I attached a single damning piece of evidence, a screenshot of the original project plan from the Seattle office, showing the realistic 6-month timeline they had proposed, and placed it next to the insane, impossible 2-month timeline Brendan had promised to his superiors. Then, with a feeling of cold, clean certainty, I hit send. The final collapse was swift and decisive. It was like watching a building get demolished. The following Monday, a team from the Inspector General's office, grim-faced men and women in dark suits, descended on Section 7. They confiscated computers. They interviewed every one of the terrified new recruits. They were there for 3 days. A week later, a quiet email went out to all management staff announcing a reorganization of Section 7. Brendan's name was nowhere in it. We found out through the corporate grapevine what had really happened. Brendan was removed from the management program permanently. He was officially demoted 3 levels down, and he was shipped off to a tiny, remote satellite office in rural Wyoming, a place we called the Gulag, where they send people they can't fire but want to forget. His career was over. His arrogant dream of becoming the youngest executive in company history had turned to ash, all because he couldn't stand the sight of a competent woman. He had his ship, but in his obsession to hunt his whale, he had harpooned himself. My new normal is peaceful. My new job is challenging and rewarding. Amelia is thriving, already a rising star in her new division. The old crew from the Pequod, we meet for drinks sometimes, we're scattered throughout the company in better roles, but will always be bound by that shared experience. We toast to competence, to justice, and to the fact that sometimes the universe poetishly serves up exactly what a person deserves. There was a final, satisfying little twist a few months later. I received an automated security notification on my work email. It was a log showing that someone had tried, and failed, to access one of my old, highly protected project files from my time in Section 7. I traced the IP address. It came from a computer terminal in a sad little office in the middle of Wyoming. It was him. A pathetic, final attempt to understand where he went wrong, trying to peek at the work of the people he tried so hard to break. And all the system gave him back was a simple, beautiful 2-word reply: access denied.